Somewhere in your house right now, there is an iron sitting in a cupboard, and the bottom of it is quietly ruining your clothes. You noticed it the last time you pressed a shirt. The iron that used to glide across the fabric like it was floating on a thin layer of air now drags. It catches. It snags on the collar and leaves a faint brown smear behind that was not there before. You turn it over, and there it is. The Soleplate, that flat metal face that is supposed to be smooth and shining, is coated in a sticky brown crust, scorched patches, a dull, oily rainbow, and a ring of black gunk around every steam hole. You have tried scraping it with a knife. You have tried a green scouring pad. Maybe, in a moment of frustration, you even took sandpaper to it. And every single time, the iron came out looking worse, snagging more, until you started wondering if it was just time to bin it and buy a new one. Here is the thing. The problem was almost never the iron. And in Japan, where pressing clothes to a crisp finish is treated as something close to an art, they worked out a long time ago that a burnt Soleplate is not a sign of a dying appliance. It is a sign of a few minutes of baked-on residue that the right ingredient lifts off in seconds. No sandpaper. No scratching. No replacing anything. The fix costs almost nothing and it uses things already sitting in your kitchen. But before you understand why it works, you have to understand what is actually happening on the bottom of that iron. Because once you see it, you will never reach for a knife again. An iron looks simple. A heavy metal plate, a heating element inside, a dial for the temperature, a tank of water for the steam. But the Soleplate itself is a precision surface. Whether it is aluminum, stainless steel, or coated with a non-stick ceramic or titanium layer, it is engineered to be microscopically smooth so that it slides over cloth with almost no friction while spreading heat evenly across the fabric. The steam holes are drilled in a specific pattern so moisture releases exactly where the plate meets the cloth. Everything about it is designed for one job: glide and press without grabbing. Now here is where the trouble starts. Every time you iron, things land on that hot plate that were never supposed to be there. Starch from spray cans bakes on first. Starch is essentially sugar, and sugar caramelizes on a hot surface the same way it does in a frying pan. Then there are the fabrics themselves. Press a shirt with even a small percentage of polyester, nylon, or any synthetic blend at too high a temperature, and the fibers do not just flatten, they melt. A microscopic film of plastic smears onto the plate and instantly hardens. Press over a plastic button, a zip, or a printed logo on a t-shirt, and you get the same thing on a larger scale. Layer after layer, week after week, these deposits build into the brown crust you're looking at now. And the steam holes are only half the story. Inside the water tank and the channels that feed those holes, your tap water is leaving something behind. Tap water carries dissolved calcium and magnesium. Every time the iron heats up and the water turns to steam, those minerals are left behind as a hard white scale, exactly like the limescale that clogs a kettle or a shower head. That scale builds up inside the steam holes and the chambers, narrowing them, and eventually it spits out as brown and white flecks right onto the shirt you are trying to press. So you have a double problem: a burnt, sticky surface on the outside, and a clogged, scaled-up plumbing system on the inside. Most people only ever attack the outside, and they attack it with the worst possible tools. Reach for a knife or a metal scraper, and you will gouge fine scratches into that precision-smooth plate. Those scratches grab fabric forever after, so the iron drags even more than it did with the crust on it. Steel wool and abrasive scouring pads do the same thing, only across the whole surface. And on a coated Soleplate, they strip the non-stick layer clean off, which is the one thing keeping fabric from sticking in the first place. Harsh oven cleaners and bleach can eat into the coating and discolor the metal. Every aggressive shortcut trades a temporary improvement for permanent damage, and the iron never glides the same way again. This is not a failure of effort. It is a mismatch between the tool and the problem. You are using force where you need chemistry. In Japan, this rarely gets to the crisis point, and the reason is cultural. There is a concept called mottainai, a deep sense of regret over waste. Letting a perfectly good iron deteriorate from careless cleaning, then throwing it out and buying another, feels wasteful in the most fundamental way. And there is the practice of suji, the idea that cleaning is not a chore you do when something becomes disgusting, but a small, consistent act of care that stops the mess from ever building up. Japanese households tend to wipe the Soleplate down while it is still warm and the residue is still soft, the same way you would rinse a pan before the sauce dries onto it. Small actions, done regularly, so the big problem never forms. But if your iron is already a brown, scorched mess, here are the methods they use to bring it back. The first and most famous is the salt method, and it borders on magic the first time you see it. Lay a sheet of plain paper on your ironing board. Greaseproof paper, baking parchment, or even a sheet of newspaper all work. Pour a generous, even layer of ordinary table salt across it. Now set your iron to a high heat with the steam switched off completely. No steam, no water. When it is hot, run the iron back and forth over the bed of salt, pressing with light pressure, for about a minute. What is happening is that the salt crystals act as a fine, gentle abrasive. They are hard enough to lift the baked-on starch and softened residue off the plate, but soft enough that they will not scratch the metal the way steel or sandpaper would. The heat softens the gunk, the salt grabs it, and you will watch the crust transfer off the iron and onto the salt, turning it brown and gray. Wipe the plate with a clean cloth afterwards, and it comes up dramatically cleaner. For the heavier, stickier deposits that the salt does not fully lift, the Japanese reach for baking soda, which they use for almost every cleaning job in the home. Unplug the iron and let it cool completely. This part matters. You are working with a cold plate now. Mix 2 tablespoons of baking soda with a little water until you have a thick paste, about the texture of toothpaste. Spread it across the Soleplate with a soft cloth, working it gently over the burnt patches in small circles, staying clear of the steam holes so you do not pack them. Baking soda is mildly alkaline, which means it breaks down the acidic, greasy compounds in the residue, and it is gentle enough to polish without scratching. Let it sit for a few minutes, then wipe it away with a fresh, damp cloth. The brown stains lift with almost no pressure, and the original surface appears underneath, looking the way it did when the iron was new. Then there is the inside, and this is the step almost everyone skips. Those clogged steam holes and the scale building inside the tank need an acid, not an abrasive. White vinegar is acetic acid, and it dissolves limescale on contact. The simplest way is to soak a cloth in white vinegar, lay it flat, and rest the cold Soleplate face down on it for 30 minutes, so the vinegar sits against every steam hole and softens the scale around them. For stubborn deposits, dip a cotton bud or a wooden toothpick in vinegar and clean each steam hole out one at a time, working around the whole plate. Never use a metal pin, which scratches the rim of the hole. To clean the tank itself, fill it with a mix of equal parts white vinegar and water. Set the iron upright on a heat-safe surface. Switch it to steam, and let it steam itself out across an old towel for a few minutes. The acid flushes the dissolved scale straight out through the holes. Then fill the tank with plain water and steam it again to rinse every trace of vinegar away before you go near a real shirt. If you live in a hard water area where the scale is severe, citric acid powder does the same job even more powerfully, and it is the descalaire of choice in Japanese homes. Dissolve a tablespoon in a cup of warm water. Fill the tank, steam it through, and rinse with clean water afterwards, exactly as you would with the vinegar. The same powder that descales their kettles and shower heads clears an iron's steam channels with the same quiet chemistry. Whichever acid you choose, the rule is the same. Always finish with a plain water steam to rinse, and always empty the tank completely when you're done. Put these 3 together, and you have covered every layer of the problem. The salt lifts the baked-on crust. The baking soda paste polishes off the sticky burnt film and brings back the shine. The vinegar or citric acid clears the scale from inside the holes and the tank. When you plug the iron back in, let it heat up, and run it across a scrap of cotton. It will feel completely different from what you have been fighting with. It glides. It does not catch. The steam comes out clean and even from every hole instead of spitting brown flecks. And it cost you the price of a spoonful of salt and a splash of vinegar instead of a brand new iron. But restoring the iron is only half the Japanese approach. The other half is making sure you never have to do this again. Start with the water. If your tap water is hard, fill the tank with distilled or filtered water instead. No minerals going in means no scale building up inside. After every ironing session, while the plate is still warm but cool enough to touch safely, give it a quick wipe with a damp cloth to catch any residue before it bakes on. Always empty the water tank when you're finished, because water left sitting inside is what feeds the scale, and it can leak and stain the plate. Store the iron standing upright on its heel, never resting face down on the Soleplate. And pay attention to the temperature dial. Most scorching happens because the iron is set hotter than the fabric actually needs. Match the heat to the cloth. Keep synthetics on a low setting, and the plate stays clean because nothing ever gets the chance to melt onto it. The truth is that a burnt, dragging iron is almost never a worn-out appliance. It is a few minutes of residue and scale sitting on a surface that was built to be smooth, and the right ingredient lifts it off without a single scratch. Salt for the crust, baking soda for the burn, vinegar or citric acid for the scale, and a 30-second wipe after each use so it never comes back. Cool water, gentle chemistry, a little consistency, and that iron will glide the way it did the day you bought it. If this was useful, hit subscribe. Every week this channel breaks down Japanese methods for everyday household problems that save you real time and real money. And tell me in the comments, what is the one appliance in your house you have been about to throw out? Drop it below, and it might just be the next video. That smooth gliding iron is about 5 minutes away. Once you feel the difference, you will never scrape a Soleplate with a knife again.